What's up, fam? And welcome to Recap Kickback. I'm Chappell. And last month, me and my guest on today's podcast reviewed episode 1 of Mr. and Mrs. Smith on Amazon Prime, starring Donald Glover and Maya Erskine. At the end of the podcast, we asked you, the listeners, if you are interested in hearing us discuss Mr. and Mrs. Smith as a complete series, and there was a resounding yes. So, with me again to talk about Mr. and Mrs. Smith, it's my co-host from Bel Air post show recap and the host of the 90-Day Fiance Rhap Up podcast. It's Pooya. Pooya, what's happening?
Hey, I'm doing good, man. First of all, shout out to the lovely listeners of the Recap Kickback because thank you for making us do this. Because I don't know if I would have watched it if not for the outstanding support for it. Everyone being on top of it. This was such a fun watch. My only regret is that we didn't go week to week on this because or did them separately, because I feel like there's a lot of things that are gonna probably get lost in the cracks today because there's so much to cover. But phenomenal show. Loved every bit of it.
Yeah, it's like a Recap Kickback is just starting. And so I'm like, okay, do I kidnap Pooya for a month and a half to talk about this show? Or do we just kind of talk about it in chunks? Do we talk about it every other week? I just really didn't know. And I thought, does anybody even want to hear us talk about this? So we tried it out. We got a lot of views. We got a lot of listener support. And so we said, okay, let's bring it back. But I agree. I think there was so much in every episode that we could have had some amazing podcasts throughout, because every episode just delivered so much to talk about, so much to speculate. And I know, like, I love talking to you about TV, so we would have had a great time. So missed opportunity, but maybe in the future, if we find out about another limited series, we got to bring this back.
I'll be there with bells on.
All right, cool. And so again, thank you all for listening. Thank you for subscribing on our YouTube page, youtube.com/@recapkickback. Make sure to go to recapkickback.com and leave a 5-star review. Let us know in the comments what you think about the podcast, what you think about the show, and give us some suggestions for what else you want us to cover here on Recap Kickback, because I got nothing but time and opportunity, so let me know and we will try to get that to you. But in the meantime, Pooya, we got a lot to discuss here. Mr. and Mrs. Smith, this is a full season review with spoilers for anybody who has not yet watched the show. If you haven't watched the show, watch episode 1, check out our previous recap, and then come back and find us here as we go over everything else. But that's your official spoiler warning. Let's get down to business. All right. I want to talk about some of the big points, and then maybe we can go over some of the more like intricate details in some of the episodes, because we had 8 episodes to cover in all. We already did number 1, and so we got 7 to talk about, and we ain't got a lot of time. So number 1 on my bullet points, Pooya, R.I.P. Max the cat.
Max the cat taken out in a very sad way. I felt bad for Max the cat.
Yeah, Max the cat kind of marks the finale episode of Mr. and Mrs. Smith, and where our real violent conflict kind of stems from between the Mr. and Mrs. Smith, because you and I speculated. We said, hey, in the first Mr. and Mrs. Smith, this is like a couple. They're both spies. They end up having to go against each other. We get to see Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt shooting at each other and looking very sexy doing it. But this one starts off as 2 spies that don't really know each other. We're trying to figure out where they're going to go. Are they going to be in a relationship, or is this just going to be a business deal, and throughout the season, we do watch that journey. But by the time Max the cat gets shot, it all goes to hell, Pooya. All right, so episode 8, we get what I think a lot of people were looking for when they were looking for Mr. and Mrs. Smith. I think they were looking for 2 spies that were in love, that were dating, that had to go out and kill each other. And man, with Jane Smith watching Max the cat get murdered and thinking that it was John Smith who did it, immediately everything goes off the rails. And we had a very action-packed episode for the finale.
Yeah, she was no longer Jane Smith. She was Jane Wick, because her cat was murdered. And she was seeking out revenge. It was the perfect frame job, because that was like the one thing that definitely pushed it there. And episode 8 is the closest you're going to get to the Brangelina movie from back in the early 2000s. So that was fun. But I will say my favorite parts of the finale were the dialogue, not even the shooting, not even the action sequence. It was the truth serum moment at the end of the episode.
Yeah, well, let's talk about it. So by the end of the season, Jane and John have been ordered to kill each other. Jane has been ordered to kill John, at least. I don't think we see John get that order. But
no.
but she looks like she's going to refuse. And then there's bullets flying at her. She ducks and dodges, but Max the cat takes that L. And from there, she's seeing red. She knows it was John and she's out to get him. But John also is kind of being set up in this moment because he shows up in his house with his mom, who we will talk about, I'm pretty sure, very soon. And he sees that the house has been booby trapped. It's like something's wrong, something's trying to get me, something's trying to hurt my mom. It must be Jane. And so we have John versus Jane in an epic battle. They're fighting, they're running, they're shooting. It's all the typical spy stuff you want to see. By the end, they're both jacked up on truth serum and really airing out some of their grievances in a way that they cannot deny, their feelings. So throughout this entire season, we watch them get to know each other, fall in love, have growing pains in their marriage, essentially have a breakup and now are about to kill each other. And they haven't been very honest about, what they think about each other a lot of times. There's a lot of sniping, a lot of snide comments, all that kind of stuff. But it's all out the window once the truth serum comes into play. And I agree with you. It was kind of cool to see them let their guard down, Pooya. They were talking from the heart for the first time throughout the entire series.
Yeah, when John hits her with the first truth serum, I was like, oh my God, he's gonna get all the truth out of her. And then he got himself, and I was like, oh, I love this. This is gonna be an open conversation, no hiding. And this is where we learn that both of them had clear shots at each other that they missed on purpose because they couldn't get themselves to kill each other. This is where Jane finds out that he did not kill Max. He had no idea that was happening. John finds out that she did not try and get my mom and me killed. She didn't set the booby traps. So I think all of that starts making them realize we're being set up against each other. We are not, like, this is not okay. And we learned that there were clear feelings there, that they're both very much still into each other in some capacity. John says, I was jealous you had sex with the two targets. And she says, I didn't do that. I was jealous that you were trying to hook up with Bev. I was like, yeah, that threw me for a loop. Okay, let me talk about this, Chappell, because the way the show was structured, I absolutely loved. This is clearly, it's got Donald Glover's fingerprints all over it. There were moments where I felt that Atlanta vibe where it's like, clearly this is all one big story, but one episode we're just focusing on couples therapy. One episode we're focusing on the side mission. The one episode where we meet John and Jane too was incredible. So I've been loving the show so much. I binged all of it in one day, with the exception of the final 30 minutes, because I wanted to save that for right before we get on the pod. So to be fresh on it, but it has been so much fun to watch it play out. And I love these little moments where you can piece back together. You get callbacks from the previous moments. We get the interaction because, like, obviously John was in cahoots with that one target that he marinated for a month and basically wined and dined and didn't kill. We get that callback there. And the hot neighbor, Chappell.
Yeah, Paul Dano.
Yeah. Hot.
Listen, Paul Dano will always be the Riddler in my eyes from the new Batman. That man is terrifying. If he's hot to people, that's their personal preference. But for me, I'm terrified of Paul Dano, and I always will be.
Yeah, no, and I think that is the fair assessment, because when they were like, oh my God, there's something going on here, these, I was like, this is okay. Listen, I'm not yucking anybody's yum. I'm not saying he's like an uggo, but yeah, hot, handsome, maybe dapper, good person. Like, I don't know. There's so many other words.
Skarsgård was right there. We killed him in the first scene. I mean, I'm just saying, if we gonna do hot, we got options here. Paul Dano, that's a terrifying man. Especially, I just watched The Spaceman on Netflix with Adam Sandler.
Is he in that?
He's the damn big, huge alien spider. I said, Paul Dano. Right, exactly. So,
is it like animatronic, or is it just a like voiceover?
He's a voice of the alien spider, Pooya. It's hard to explain. Just know this man is a menace, and if they call him hot, he's hot. But to me, I'd rather stay away.
All right, tell me in the recap kickback, folks, because I know you covered this on Nothing But Netflix. Is Spaceman a watch or a not watch?
I say watch it, but manage your expectations. It's probably not what you probably not what you're thinking. But yes, Paul Dano. So let's talk about the hot neighbor, right?
Yes.
Hot neighbor comes up a couple times throughout this series. And there's question about what is he actually doing. Throughout the series, Pooya, I was firmly convinced that this man was a supervillain. I couldn't figure out what he was there to do.
Mhm.
I knew he was watching them closely, but by the end, Pooya, it seems like he's just a real estate guy. That's it.
Yeah, this was so funny. And again, this is what I feel like there's a nod to Atlanta, a very serious moment that gets cut by a very comedic circumstance where we find out that he's essentially a New Yorker who we talked about this big ass
Yes.
apartment in episode 1.
Mhm.
And he's on our mindset where he's like, yeah, I just don't I don't know how you were able to combine this historical place into this big place, and how would you be able to pull that off in New York, and you're both software engineers, how do you pay for that? So he was just curious as all hell about the house the neighbors were living in, not so much the neighbors themselves.
Yeah. And that's it. I mean, even by the end, when the house is destroyed basically from the inside out, and there's probably some dead bodies in there, he seems just happy to be able to sell it. He's like, it's my Moby Dick. This is my
Yeah.
white whale. I'm trying to make this happen.
I don't know how real estate selling properties work, because I know real estate agents have listings that they can sell for a client and then they get a percentage. But does he think that they're going to give him the listing? Like, I don't understand what he thinks, like how he would get that.
Yeah, he's a real estate analyst. So I think he's been hired to kind of find these properties to get to the. So I think he's probably going to get like a commission on it or something like that. And I mean, it's an amazing house. We talked about it. Some of the comments in the YouTube, I believe it was Jay West was in the comments like, y'all are really harping on this house thing. I was like, we knew it. We was right.
On the right side of history on that one.
We were. Pooya, we were also very wrong about a lot of stuff. A lot of stuff.
Yes.
We had a lot of questions in episode 1. For the people who might not remember episode 1, they on a mission to get a box. The mysterious box has a cake in it. The cake is probably a bomb. The bomb blows up. They run away, and we get them. That's their first meeting. That's their first mission that we ever see. Pooya and I had a lot of questions about their interactions. We were learning a lot about their backstories. Pooya, there's no pedophile. The pancakes. We never get the what happened. What was that?
Dad
That was our
not
big
a creep.
question.
No one murdered anybody's sister.
Dina.
None of that.
Yeah, we wasted time. But I also think that was why this would have been so fun to talk about episodically, because we would have done that for each episode. When in reality, these episodes were linear, but they weren't like day by day, right?
No.
It was hard to really tell how much time was passing throughout because they were doing missions that we didn't even see, Pooya.
Yeah, I feel like for me, the things that made me realize we're on a time jump was how strong their feelings were, talking about having a baby. I was like, okay, this must have been going on at least like 4 or 5 months. Like, to me, it wasn't like, all right, this is the second week they've been together. And also, I feel like I'm not supposed to think that they got 3 fails in like the first 8 missions they did, you know? So that's why I also thought, okay, we're jumping on time a little bit, but it didn't steal away from the show for me. It didn't feel like we're yada yadaing, you know what I mean?
Right. It felt like it was just the natural progression. There are some days where you wake up and things are normal. You have your normal days where nothing really of note happens. I'm sure they're spies, so there's always something. But for them, they kind of dilute it down to the ones that we had to see, the moments that we needed to see in the relationship. And we got some flashbacks too. So they made sure to go back and put the pieces together for us throughout. Now, episode 1, they found the bomb, they meet, they get together. But this is just a business trip. We'll do a few assignments together and then we'll move on. This is not going to be a real relationship. Episode 2, Pooya, listen. I love this episode of television. It is insane. All of it's cracked behavior. They have to go to this weird silent auction with a bunch of rich people. They're still learning the way that each of them kind of approaches being a spy. We find out that Jane is probably more serious about some of the rules and regulations of being a spy, whereas John is getting by on charisma a lot. And in these moments, we get to see them, kind of still trying to figure each other out. In the first episode, we saw John doing a lot of snooping, like a lot of like going through Jane's stuff, kind of like taking pictures of her, trying to figure out more about her. But we didn't see that from Jane. And that continued into the second episode. He snoops on her computer and finds that she is watching a cannibal and vor play video, porn.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you familiar with Vor?
I am as a concept, but not as a consumer.
Oh, I swear I thought you were going to say as a consumer. I was going to say, well, tell me more.
Tell me about your thoughts on it. Give me the play-by-play. Yeah, no, I know it exists, and what's funny is I know it exists because I've seen it come up on TV shows. Like I watch CSI, and there was a huge arc where there was some Vor content going on, and it was a big part of the case. So I haven't done a deep dive into it, but you are a professional journalist. Tell me more.
I was that day years old when I found out what Vor was. I had never heard the word.
You're lying.
I promise. I was in shock. I said, well, what is Vor? And then you hear the woman in the background like, rub this olive oil all over you. Don't put me in that oven. Don't try to cook me. I said, cook you? What's happening here?
This was a cooking play of some sort.
Yeah, like devour the person, like actually eat them, swallow them. It's too much. Yeah, gobble me, swallow me, or whatever Meg said, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So he's snooping. He finds this. She's planting stuff for him to find. Spoiler alert: she's not into that kind of thing, but it is keeping him kind of off balance as he's exploring what he feels like could be a potential relationship in that episode. They go into this silent auction. Their mission is to use a truth serum, the one that we talked about prior. Use one dose of truth serum on this billionaire and get him to talk, and then record everything he says. But in order to get the billionaire, they approach him with a proposition. They're like, hey, we need to pull you to the back.
Well,
it's me.
Can we rewind back to when they get to the auction and John goes to enter and he immediately surveys the scene? He's like, I'm going in as catering. She's like, why? He's like, well, I'm going to be like one of 6 black people there, and they're probably all going to know each other. So I will not be able to infiltrate. Let me be the caterer. I was like, this is relatable content. I definitely have been in situations like this where I come in, I'm like, okay, there's a bunch of us brown people. I'm like, oh, but they're all friends. Shoot.
Yeah.
No, I don't. No one. No, I'm alone still in a way.
Yeah, no, this show really tackles race in an interesting way. We see Donald Glover's, stance on being a black man in this industry, and kind of like and being married to an Asian woman, and vice versa. And we see that he leans a lot into, oh, well, this is racial, or this is racial. Sometimes it's like situations like this where it's very beneficial, and then other times he's using it as a way to bond with people, but also at the expense of his significant other. So yeah, we'll talk about that too. But yeah, so that kind of flags up one of the issues that they're going to have moving forward. But again, these things start off very small, and then they start to snowball throughout the series and get bigger and bigger until we finally see them trying to kill each other at the end. But they meet their billionaire. Now, Pooya, one of the things that I noticed as well is that in every episode, starting with number 1, we just get random A-list cameos from different celebrities. In episode 1, we had Alexander Skarsgård and Eliza Gonzalez, who were killed immediately as our first John and Jane Smith that we run into. Episode 2, we have John Turturro as our billionaire here. And I was like, wait, is this a running theme? Throughout the series, there's several different A-listers. I think in every episode, there's kind of like a new face of that episode, that A-list celebrity. And for this one, it was John Turturro, who is a big old freak, Pooya. He wants them to do like role play.
Yeah, they get him into a room basically with Jane saying, how about we get one of the waiters and like have them do something for us? And that's the way they're going to like close him in. So they get John, and this billionaire says, all right, on your knees. Both of you on your knees, and now you're dogs, and kiss like dogs. And not gonna lie, I was like, please don't let this escalate any further. Yeah, and then ultimately they hit him with a double truth serum, which they were specifically told keep it to 1 dose. They double dose this man.
Yeah, it was very weird. They double dose him, and then he goes on to do what you do when you have a truth serum in you. I guess he starts telling the truth, but he does not survive this interaction. He ends up dying. They have to take his body to the house, throw him in the bathtub, break him down, probably bury him in the backyard. It was a great bonding moment for the two of them because this was one of the first missions we see outside, one of the first missions we see them do, but also they didn't do it well. This was basically their first failure, if I'm not mistaken, Pooya.
Yeah, this was fail number 1 of 3. And obviously the 2 doses does not help this, because then you had the billionaire getting on stage and basically saying, I make my money illegally and I don't care. So that was not great for them. It made it a bit of a spectacle. You know what's funny though? I did see an article. Donald Glover did an interview and he said that John Turturro gave him COVID while shooting Mr. and Mrs. Smith.
Oh.
So he said, yeah, we got a little bit of vacation there, a little break in production thanks to this man. So yeah, there you go.
They were pretty close when they were acting like dogs, and John Turturro was down there sniffing them. So maybe that was the moment when it happened. But yes, they killed John Turturro in this episode. But we see a little Easter egg of something that will come later on. Jane deposits a marble into the jar. It's her second marble into the jar after this is said and done. And by episode 8, we learned that Jane has sociopathic tendencies, and whenever she does something sociopathic, she just inserts a marble. It's like her swear jar. She inserts a marble into the jar to track it so that she can make sure she's not losing her mind. I think by the end of the series, she had 78 marbles in there.
That's what I think. Yeah, 78 of them.
Pooya, what do you think about this?
I mean, I think it's one way to measure if you're going overboard, because it's a physical representation of what you're seeing. And the more it feels like, we're like, oh my God, okay, I don't know what you do. What's the result then? Like, how do you combat it? But I definitely think for a visual, it's definitely a good way to go. And I love this as an Easter egg in the show, because I missed this. I obviously heard her talk about it in the finale, but I forgot about it being on my screen in the early days.
Yeah, by that episode, there was only 2 marbles in the jar. But by the end of the series, there's 78. So a lot goes on that makes you should really be terrified of Jane at that point. If you walked into somebody's house and they had that jar of marbles and they told you, yeah, sometimes I do some weird stuff and I track it using these marbles, what is your reaction supposed to be at that point? Because I feel like if you try to leave, you could be in danger.
Yeah, I feel like it's if I was told that's what this is, you're gonna see a cutout of me in the wall running away, because I don't play.
Yeah, it's unsafe. But John doesn't know this yet. He hasn't figured that out by episode 2. Episode 3, they have their next mission, and they are tracking down this woman who is filthy rich. They have to go and bug her phone, her husband's phone, and this woman is played by Sharon Horgan. So this is funny for me anyway, because this episode, it felt like they started to kind of date each other in a way. You know, it was very weird, because we know obviously they're married, but they had been looking at this as a business, and now it feels like, okay, they've committed to being intimate. Let's get to know each other. And while watching Sharon Horgan's character, Gavone Martin, and her husband deal with their divorce, they learn a lot about each other, and it doesn't feel like they're very compatible, Pooya. But one of the things that stood out the most is that Donald Glover is still in contact with his mom.
Yeah, so they're not supposed to be. He, in the first episode, we saw him ask, "Oh, even to my mom?" Okay, yeah, that's fine. But he's been talking to her, and that moment on the ski lift when he starts talking to her, he's like, "Have you tried turning it off and on?" Again, relatable content. How many of us have played tech support to our families? Plenty, often,
every day.
Yeah. So this was very funny for him to let it be known how attached he is to her, and that being a bit of a red flag for Jane. But also, Jane didn't rat him out. Jane didn't snitch to Hi. So there's clearly a connection here. Obviously, they ended up having the sex at the end of episode 2, after finding out the gore content was not it, was a fakie. They still had the relations, and definitely you can tell that what started off as we're gonna just be business professionals started becoming more of a personal thing.
Yeah, but he's putting their lives in danger, right? We talked about this in episode 1. The idea that you have to leave your family behind to be a super spy, it's jarring, but it makes sense, because why would you want your family connected to something like this? You have to change your name. You have to marry somebody. You have to start killing people, all that stuff. He's still talking to his mom. She's still calling him by his birth name. She's calling this man Michael. If I'm Jane, I'm thinking, what did I just get myself into? Because I didn't sign up for this. Now we have loose ends that we need to tie up. And she works with them pretty well. But you're right. I think it's a mark of her saying, all right, I'm all in on him. Like I get we work for the company, we have obligations, but I'm all in on my husband. But for me, there's other little tidbits of getting to know each other, dating, all that stuff that they're dealing with. They talk about sharing their locations, Pooya. And this, for me, this doesn't seem like that big of a deal, but I don't know. John didn't seem the most comfortable with it.
I think it depends on the person. I've said this on other podcasts before. Liana and I have locations shared on. And this really started when we were doing long distance because Liana would drive to Montreal. I would take the bus to Montreal, but Liana obviously did like a 5-6 hour drive. So this was a way for both of us because connection could be very choppy. So we couldn't really be texting or talking while she was driving home. And this was a way for us to both know that the other is getting home safe or everything's chill. And then ultimately stuck around. But neither of us see it as a big deal. Like it's really not I'm keeping tabs on you. It's more of a, in case of emergency, I haven't heard from you. Let me make sure you're okay. Are you in a weird location? Like what's up kind of thing. But I feel like there are people who see it as a huge like violation of privacy or mistrust. I think it depends on how the relationship's built. And for John, it felt like he didn't want to be controlled because he turns off location after they have a bit of a fight. But you're at a ski resort. Like where could you possibly be going that you need this location off?
Yeah, he did it almost just like as an act of rebellion,
Yeah.
Jane's on his ass. I will say this, once she finds out about mom, she does not let up. Every other time you hear her talking about something, she's like, I bet you told your mama that, and so he's annoyed. They get into an argument. He turns off his location. I think as spies, it's kind of a good thing to have. You yes, they are married, and as a couple, your mileage may vary on that type of transparency. But as spies who work together, who are potentially, going out on missions and needing to know where each other is and trying to communicate, I think that's what you want to do, right? You want to share your location.
Yeah, I mean, as a spy, you're working and you are a high risk spy. You're working the high risk gig. If John is to get apprehended or like knocked out and they take him somewhere, you need Jane to be there to help you. She can't help you if your location's off because you felt petty. Like that is not the move. And this is, I think, the problem with like both of them being professionals but forming a relationship. Because as a professional, you're never switching off the location. But in a petty couples argument where you're trying to stick it a little bit, you could, and I could see myself doing something like this as a petty comeback.
Yeah, just like a little, like you said, just kind of just like, you can't control me. I'm grown, So yeah, that happens here for sure. By the end of this, we find that maybe John should have kept his location on. Jane has to show up and they get into, a fight, a skirmish with whoever these other people are that are trying to kidnap the billionaire. While the billionaire survives this whole interaction, her husband is like, no, that showed me how much I love you. What are you talking about? We're better.
Don't you love, so she gets kidnapped. They use her phone to call the husband and they're like, you're going to liquidate all the shares. He's like, we can't do that. It's illegal. They're like, well, if you don't do it, she dies. And he was like, no, I'm not doing that. And then you hear in the back of my like, he said no. And then obviously John and Jane save the day and she's alive still. But somehow this helps their marriage, which I'm sorry, but if you refuse to do something to keep me alive, I don't care what lesson you learned that. This isn't Sesame Street. I don't care what you learned that day. Boo you, it's done.
Listen, from what we understand, they had an agreement. She's a billionaire. She's worth a lot of money, and people are going to try to kidnap her to get the money. And so it looks like her and her husband had talked about this. If I'm ever in a situation like that, you do not negotiate with terrorists. But I'm with you. I mean, it's like, in theory, that's cool, but also save me. But, he did what she wanted her to do. And then he also said, and now that I've had to say the words, I realize that all this petty arguing and the bickering and stuff like that, don't mean nothing to me. I'd rather just be with you. And so it fixes their marriage, but it does leave John and Jane in tight spot because John almost does not survive this mission. Jane has to save him and his penis by the end of it.
Oh my God, the penis incident. Yeah, so he was left in the cold for a little too long there. And then Jane takes him, draws a hot bath for him, and he says that I can't feel my penis in a very like chill, panicked voice, but like calm. And I was like, oh, this is tragic. And then she's like clearly cupping it to like help out or bring it back to life. And then this shady, can we cuss here?
Yeah, let's do it.
This shady fuck. Because she's holding it already. And he's like, it would help if maybe you put your mouth on it. It's like, what? And this is when she realizes, all right, he's full of it. He's fine now.
Yeah, but this is the fun part, I guess, of dating, right? Like they're getting to know each other. They're still picking at each other in fun ways. Like obviously she saved his life. He's joking about, his penis needing to be saved. They decide that they're going to sleep in the same bed. And he tells her, you don't have to keep running out to fart. You can fart around me. It's all good. So by episode 3, it looks like this might be a happy couple, Pooya. Now we know we are wrong in thinking that though.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously one of those things where because we know about the old movie and like the show, it was like, at some point they're going to go at each other. It's just a matter of when. But I feel like the biggest shock to me and the thing I enjoyed most about the season is that I kept waiting for that shoe to drop. And I love that it didn't until episode 8 because we just watched them in different situations trying to save the relationship, either one or the other or both, trying like work on the relationship and foster it. And I love that. I love that we got that. It wasn't just a job.
Yeah. So by the next episode, we have what I would consider probably one of the best episodes is when they have the day off, Pooya. They get to go to the farmer's market. And this is when they run into John and Jane Smith, I guess number 3, because the first one that we know is Alexander Skarsgård. We know this, our John and Jane is the second John and Jane that we know. And then we learn about this John and Jane. And this John and Jane is almost the opposite of the couple that we learned before, right? Wagner Moura and Parker Posey. People might know Wagner Moura as I believe he was in Narcos. Yeah, and then Parker Posey, like a mega star as well. They star in this as the other John and Jane. They are seemingly nice. I thought it was very weird, Pooya, when he meets John Smith and says, oh, wait, you also are John Smith. You must be a spy. Let's hang out. I was like, wait, that's not supposed to happen.
Yeah, I feel like it was when he saw John Smith's card. He saw the logo of the company, the agency they work for or whatever. And that's what tipped him off to, okay, this is him. This is someone who like knows what's going on.
Yeah, but so this is like a mega network though, right? There's a lot. How many John and Jane Smiths are there out there?
So many, because we learned that there is high risk, there's super high risk, there is low risk, which is delivering the packages. Yeah, so there's definitely different branches and a lot of other Smiths out there in the wild. And he just somehow managed to bump into one at the farmer's market of all places.
Right. Now, if you've seen the entire series, this ain't no coincidence. Them people is tracking them. You don't run into another super spy at a farmer's market and be like, oh, you're a spy too? That's cool. But we don't know that in the moment. We just see this other couple. I was suspicious of them the entire time because I just thought, what could you possibly want to be friends with another spy couple for? It just doesn't make sense. They come over for dinner. They're talking. They're getting to know each other. And this John and Jane Smith, they like each other. They're talking about immediately they were having the sex. They were like going on missions. They're extremely high risk. Like they're not regular high risk like our John and Jane. They doing some extra crazy stuff, but they're so laid back, so likable. They have a few quirks about them. I mean, John Smith only sneezes in 3s, which is odd. But yeah, Pooya, I didn't know what to think about this episode. I could not have foreseen it turning into, hey, we're all drunk. Do y'all want to just go on one of our missions? Do you want to try to be extremely high risk this time? Go for it.
So with how laid back those two were, it was very clear to me that, oh, these two have been doing this work for a minute. So when they were like, yeah, we're going to go on a mission now. We're due to go to one right now. I thought this makes sense because they're clearly, this is like when you get into a workplace and you're new. So you're like, ooh, can I take an extra 5 for a smoke break? I don't know. There might be mean. And then the people that have been there for a minute are like, oh, I took 5 smoke breaks and my break. Like, this is just how we roll. I feel like you got that laid back because you got like job security in a way, or you're just confident in it. And they were like, it's more fun this way, which I thought, okay, that kind of checks out to me. Cool. However, what didn't make sense to me was when they offered the invite up to our John and Jane, that they took him up on it. I felt like, but obviously now knowing the sociopathic tendencies of one Jane, because she's the one who signed them up for it, it makes sense. But in the moment, I was like, why are you doing this? I don't understand.
Yeah, John is talking in this episode about, like, maybe do extremely high risk for a little bit and then maybe settle down, maybe
Trying to go to that low risk.
Right, try low risk, maybe get out of the business. They tell the new John and Jane, yeah, we were thinking, let's do a few missions together, after a while, once we make a little bit of money, let's just quit. And John is moved to almost tears laughing at them because he's like, what are you talking about? You don't just get to quit this job. We didn't really discuss that, Pooya, in the first episode, but it is absurd to me to think that they just thought, okay, I could just retire from being a spy and go back to being who I was.
Yeah, no, this was fascinating to me because if you're John, you're talking about doing low risk. Ain't no way you're trying to do high risk.
Right.
But I think the added measure here was, well, these are 2 people who are also John and Jane's. We can talk to them about the stuff we're doing because otherwise we can't talk about this with anybody else. And they're inviting us. Let's go. It'll be fun to go and see what they do. What I don't think either of them were expecting was that these 2 were never going on that mission and we're just pawning it off on these 2 poor souls.
Yeah, they just wanted to see if they come back alive. It's like eventually they're gonna have to kill him anyway. So they're like, yeah, let's go ahead, go for it. I did not trust this new John and Jane at all until they did mention that they listened to Sade, and I was like, okay, if you go up for Sade, I'm gonna have to back off a little bit. They like Maya, they like Sade. I was like, all right, y'all might not be that bad, but by the end, we see John and Jane, our John and Jane, in the forest, tied up, about to be murdered by a bunch of kids, 17 to 19-year-olds, and they have to machete their way out of there by just slicing and dicing all of these children and escaping into the forest. It happened so fast. But I think this is the moment where we hear John and Jane tell each other that they love each other for the first time. What a character arc, Pooya.
Yeah, I mean, sitting there in the blood of so many people that they've had to take out and really just doing the most gruesome, clearly based on their demeanor, you were supposed to feel that, yeah, this is high risk. What they're doing is not as high risk because they looked like they had gone through it. Like they've never experienced anything like this before. And they do get compensated though, Chappell. They get the entire purse off of the John and Jane 2. It was about what, 350K?
Yeah, something like that. They're like, oh yeah, we won't even split it with you. How about we just let y'all have that? And so yeah, they survive it, they get the money. But by the end of the episode, we see Jane is watching a little YouTube video called Former Ballerina with Alzheimer's Dances to Swan Lake. And she's trying to force herself to cry and she's being unsuccessful. So she's going through one of the most traumatic things that anybody probably could ever go through. And she can't even figure out how to cry about it. John, run for the hills. What are you doing?
She's trying to feel something.
Yeah, she's trying to feel something. The one thing we know that they can feel, this couple, is jealousy. There's a moment where I think they run into is it Ursula Corbero as Rooney, and Rooney is one of John's exes. I also thought this was curious because if you're supposed to leave your old life behind, I just really don't think you should be seeing your homies and exes from your past lifestyle. Like, I should not be able to run into one of my classmates at that point. I'm a different person. I mean, you look the same. But essentially, doesn't that blow your cover when somebody's like, I don't remember you?
Well, that's the thing, though. I feel like somehow he's able to evade it where she doesn't say Michael's name. She doesn't, they don't really exchange names to my knowledge. So that's good. But then I feel like it's one of those things where you're supposed to trust your Jane. So even if a couple things leaks out, I don't think it's as concerning.
Yeah. Well, with this revelation that there is the ex, we find out about Jane's jealousy, because she makes the joke, or she insinuates, she gaslights this man. I'll just call it what it is. She tells him, "Hey, it's so nice of you, dating that woman, and like, I mean, I don't know like what the extent of your relationship was, but with her only having one hand." And John cannot even remember if this woman that he dated and had a mostly physical relationship with has both hands. This is Jane messing with his head, but it shows that she does care about him enough to be jealous.
This is a power move
Hmm.
because she got so much information out of this one little lie. The fact that he didn't remember, I think, is very telling of like, okay, John, I see you. You're out here. You're doing your thing. You've been with multiple people, so much so that
Hmm.
a detail like this you may have missed. But it was 100% gaslighting.
Yeah, she ate him up.
Mhm.
By the end of the episode, they talk about it, and he realizes obviously that this person did have two hands, and that he didn't overlook it, and that Jane, she really really likes him. She just does, and I think we've been tracking I guess, the stages of a relationship to this point. We got the blind date where they get the bomb. We get where they start dating, and they go on their silent auction. We get, when they start to really get into those dating woes, finding out about the location and all that stuff. Here we have, meeting couple friends. That always happens in
Mhm.
relationship as well, right? Episode 5, what if they decide to have kids? Pooya, I love this episode so much. I watched it the first time and I was like, oh, that was a cool episode. And then I watched it again, noticing that Ron Perlman's character throughout this episode, he is basically the avatar for what if John and Jane had a child. And so they are dragging this grown ass man from
Mhm.
Sons of Anarchy throughout this episode, and he is doing everything a kid does. He's complaining, he's whining. I'm tired. I want to go home. I don't want to do this. I can't breathe. Can you roll down my window? Like everything, but it's packaged in this older gentleman. I love this episode so much. It allows them to explore whether or not they want to have kids, what they would be like as parents, and it also might be another mission that they didn't do great on.
Yeah, so they go to Italy for this one, and the
Mhm.
whole plan is to get this guy and take him to the safe house. Safe house is compromised. So they're in a big shooting war in the middle of Italy. Come to find out that they're at a new safe house that no one knows about, and it's because John bought a place in
Mhm.
Italy without seeing it first.
Yeah.
They're making good money as Mr. and Mrs. Smith, let me tell you.
Yeah, definitely. After that bonus from from that one mission we saw in the previous episode, I'm thinking, okay, they can afford whatever they want. But again, this is probably another relationship issue, right? Doing something
Mhm.
without talking to your spouse about it, making big decisions without looping your partner in. We see that unfold here. Jane is like, I'm not mad. I promise I'm not mad. I just really think we should have talked about it. But they don't want to argue in front of the hostage because, he's like a child. He's like, I'm hungry. I want a cigarette. Dang, I hate it here. At some point, I think he literally said, I hate it here, and storms up and goes to his room. Um, good TV. I love the writing for this because
Mhm.
it was a very clever way of them, for them to explore. Okay, what if you do have a child, and what does that look like when spies try to settle down and have kids?
Right. I did love this episode for that. I feel like they dove into a lot of conversations. And I think, back to the Easter egg conversation, not having seen the whole season, there's a big, big conversation in this episode that sets up the finale really well if we want to dive into it. So when they were sitting outside, when we find out that because he told him, actually, I lied. I didn't have any cigarettes. He
Yeah,
actually had one.
yeah,
So they're having that, they're hanging out, and they kind of have their vows as a couple. And in the vows, we get Jane promising not to judge him for how often he talks to his mom. And then
she lied.
John says that, he's not going to judge her for pretending her cat will live forever. And Jane was like, no, 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 no. I'm not going to think about that. He will live forever. Spoiler
Hmm.
alert, Max did not live forever.
R.I.P.
But we see John say to Jane, I vow never to kill you.
Yeah,
And wouldn't you know it, that does come into play. But then things started getting hot and heavy, and then he said, I want to put a baby in you. And that stopped any momentum to sex.
Yeah, well, Toby showed up as well and like, I threw up, so typical
Like
kids.
that was such a child because he's standing like holding the glass mirror, like you can see his entire person there. I don't feel so good.
I don't feel so good. What are y'all doing? Pay attention to me. Yeah. So, yeah, they talk about it. I mean, they say kids are the best birth control, and I mean, we see Toby in this situation really blocking any of that from happening. But
Mhm.
another conversation that has to be tackled because John wants to have kids. He's like, yeah, we can do that. We can be super spies and, put our lives in danger and also have a kid. And James like, what are you talking about? That doesn't make any sense. So they end up getting a box at the door and
Mhm.
it says, well done, Jane. And it has a bottle and a note attached to it. Because throughout the episode, Hi has been messaging Jane and being like, Jane, you good? What's up? You happy with this whole situation? You want to trade in your John for another John? Like,
Yeah.
what are you thinking?
It's so fascinating, and this should have been the first clue to me that Hi has bugged the place and is monitoring them because we've heard John say he's very willing to go low risk, but it's very clear Jane isn't. And
Mhm.
Hi randomly was like, "Are you feeling good? How do you feel about your John? Is the mission good?" Yeah, we see you advancing. We see you improving upon where you are. And then this definitely puts in a crack into the couple because we find out that Jane covers a lot of the logistics, the back and forths with Hi to like debrief on the mission summary or whatever. And
Mhm.
John says, "Are you taking credit? Like, are you not? What did you say in the report?" She's like, "I said everything the way it happened." Like, but you gave yourself the credit for coming up with whatever because she did blow up his house, right?
Yeah.
She's the one
She
who
blew up the cottage.
blows up the cottage by putting a stick of dynamite in the oven. Which, by the way, when Mr. Man dropped the dynamite on the floor willy-nilly, I genuinely thought they were going to explode.
Is that how dynamite works? You just drop it?
I mean, the only recollection I have of dynamite, and that was probably like old dynamite, was on Lost when that one character, the high school teacher, waves it and then explodes in front of everybody.
Yeah.
But that was like that had sweated some of the bad stuff, so maybe that was the problem.
I think of those like those cartoons with the coyote and they have that long like thin string and like you have to light it and then you have to wait. Yeah, that's how
Mhm.
I envision dynamite. So I just think in my mind, just naked dynamite doesn't do anything, but sticking it in the
Mhm.
oven definitely probably will, right? And so she blows up the cottage and yeah, at this point, it does feel like John doesn't really trust her. He's like, it feels like you're trying to make me look bad, or you're trying to
Yeah.
advance without me. Even though we see Jane, she might be toying with the idea, but she's not actually acting on it. Haha's like, "You good?" She's like, "Yeah, I'm chilling. I'm good. It could be better,
Mhm.
but whatever." By the next episode, they're in couples therapy, Pooya, and we get Sarah Paulson as the therapist. And again, love this episode because they're now having couples therapy about two different things, right? They're obviously spies and they work together, but they're actually a couple as well. So they're trying to talk about how work is interfering with their relationship and how it's basically become one thing. Sarah Paulson, of course, is saying, okay, well, just stop working together. Like y'all don't
Mhm.
have to go on these missions. I mean, you don't have to do IT and tech support together. You don't have to do this software stuff that y'all are doing, this whatever this ridiculous cover story is. But we know they actually do kind of have to do those things together. But by the end of the episode, I think they decide maybe you do your thing and I do my own thing. So this feels like almost a separation of the couple.
Yeah, I definitely feel like that's where it was headed. I feel like they kind of set the breadcrumbs in with John feeling a type of way. His ego was shattered a little bit by not getting equal praise for the job they're doing and feeling like, okay, so Jane's favored over me. That's not good. But also Jane has kind of become the alpha in the relationship a little bit by taking control, by kind of setting the stage of how things should go, and I feel like John was very okay with letting that happen until he realized that, oh, but I'm not getting any credit. Now I need to do it my way. And obviously, this does lead us into the first mission that he's handling his way, which kind of goes sideways in its own right, and causes them, I believe that was their third fail, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, it looks like it. And so there's like a poker game that he infiltrates with all these black dudes, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I'm a black dude. I'm gonna go in. I'm gonna
Mhm.
infiltrate, and I'm gonna make it happen." Jane's kind of like, look, we could really just kill them and move on. But he's like, no, I want to
Yeah.
do it my way. Let me take the lead. He goes in, he's talking to them, he's bonding over classic bonding techniques, misogyny, racism, all that good stuff. And Jane is outside seething because she's like, what's happening? Why are you in there doing this? John eventually tells Sarah Paulson, the therapist, look, she's jealous because there are certain things that I can bond with them on. There are certain ways I can approach this that she just doesn't have the ability to do. And she's telling him, I don't like the way you're talking about me. And I don't like the way that you try to make it look like I want to take control when sometimes you're just not acting competent. You're pretending to be incompetent and you're getting by on your charisma alone. So they're dealing with a lot of feelings. A lot of feelings are like, well, emotions about their relationship, kind of the way they interact with each other, but also how this is affecting their work. And so one of the funniest parts of this episode, Pooya, I like was when they were showing how they work together on their mission and they're running up the elevator. You know, Jane's on the elevator and she's fighting, and John, he's got asthma and he's running up the stairs and he's trying to get, and before he makes it to the roof, Jane pushes the bad guy off the roof and says, die, motherfucker. And he's like, wait, when did we get catchphrases?
He was dying on the stairs laughing on this. And I thought that was a very funny moment to like, it's a very serious situation. He's running up the stairs trying to like save her. She kills a guy, says, die, motherfucker. And he's like, where did that come from? Like,
yeah. It was good. It was good. She had been fighting that man up several like level in an elevator for minutes, So as far as I'm concerned, you can say whatever you have to say at that point. You this guy got to go, and he made fun of her, but she wasn't loving it. She's kind of like, man, like I was kind of feeling it in that moment. But they're still, you can tell they're still friendly with each other. But there's certain things that they do to each other that gets under their skin. She's still bringing up his mom as well, Pooya.
Yeah, I mean, the mom thing has always been continuously coming back and back and back. And I feel like for Jane, from where she's standing, she's given up everything to do this with him. And John's not really completely in it because, again, mom is very much in the picture. And she feels like, well, if you weren't willing to compromise on that and like accept that, then what are you really going to accept? How are you really going to navigate this relationship and job?
Yeah, one of the other things that comes up is that earlier in the series, John had mentioned that everybody has read The Prophet, this book, because he tries to minimize this connection that Jane is having with the next door neighbor, Paul Dano. Come to find out, everybody has not read that book. John has not read that book. And that's another thing that Jane is going to harp on because she's like, you don't read books. And he's like, are you calling me dumb? Are you trying to insinuate that I'm stupid? And so all of these little pressure points are just being pressed constantly through this episode where they have a pretty decent therapy session, but they also have to blow up the therapist's house because they've been recording all of it. And I think a lot of this is, privileged information.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I think the biggest thing that caused them to get in a place that got them to the therapy session the last time was she asked him who his emergency contact is. And he said, it's my mom. And she's like, mine is you. So yeah. Where does that leave you? But how did you feel about the clapback he had on her out in the woods? Because I felt like that was too far. Like he definitely went in on her.
Yeah, he basically told her she didn't know how to love people because her parents didn't love her and that she's a robot. And all the things he's saying, there might be some truth to it, especially when we find out that she's essentially a sociopath, right? Or she has sociopathic tendencies. So when you're saying you don't know how to love somebody or you don't know how to feel, that cuts deep when it's low-key kind of accurate, But yeah, he went left. He was just like, you don't understand the love I have for my mom because your family doesn't love you. And I was like, whoo, all right. This is basically the divorce, but we have one more step to get there because episode 7 is called Infidelity. And we see that Jane appears at the home of Bev, played by Michaela Cole. People might know her from Wakanda Forever, but she in this moment is John's mistress, I guess. It seems like they haven't had a physical relationship, Pooya, but they at least have been bonding emotionally.
Yeah, well, this is supposedly Bev is a target. Bev is the mission. And we find out that what should have been like a 3-day max job, he's been doing for a month. So naturally, Jane thinks, okay, something's going on here. He's having sex with her or something. Because why is it going on this long? because we don't find out that she's a mark until way later in the episode, because the episode starts with Jane confronting her and asking her what she's been doing with her husband. And we find out that John has told this woman a lot about what they do and his life in general.
Yeah. Well, I think she's a spy too, right? Because when they start to fight with her, she does not go quietly.
No, she's definitely. I think we find out that she works for another agency.
Right. So what would be the competing agencies things? Like, so because this is Mr. and Mrs. Smith company. Like, is there like another couple
Mr.
name
and Mrs. Jones company?
Jones company. Yeah, the Joneses. Keeping up with the Joneses company. Yeah, because this lady, she's fighting with them. Obviously, they're fighting with each other because they're having this moment where they have to talk about, all right, are you in love with this woman? Like, you're having an emotional affair. Can you admit that? But this is when they officially are like, okay, we're done with John. This is your third failed mission. Jane gets the message. It's time for you to terminate him. And she's like, I'm not gonna address that. I'm actually gonna move forward. We don't have to do that. But then a box arrives, there's a new laptop and a phone, and it looks like Jane is being reassigned. So when we go into episode 8, I'm thinking, what exactly are we going to have to do here? The final mission for Jane: terminate your Smith. Take out the John. We see Max the cat killed almost instantly in the episode. And so it feels like John might have got the same message, right? And so maybe he attacked her. But no, we don't see who actually shoots and kills Max, but that is the thing that gets the ball rolling. Max dies. Jane comes after John, and John, trying to protect his mom, comes after Jane. They meet in public. And when they meet, there's a moment where if they could honestly have a conversation, they could get down to the bottom of this. They meet up in a public place so that neither one of them tries anything crazy. And immediately, Jane's just like, you're the cruelest person I've ever met. Now, boom. This man just killed your cat. You're calling him cruel. That makes sense. John does not say, why do you think I'm cruel? What are you accusing me of? He starts firing back as well. And so they're so busy pointing fingers that it does look like they don't even see that the potential bad guy is actually the third John and Jane Smith that we met this season from the farmer's market. They're out to get them. And now this John and Jane are fighting too much to even realize it.
Yeah, they don't even notice. Obviously, we don't until we get to the truth serum. Neither of them says why they're feeling these things. He's not saying you were going to kill my mom. She's not saying you killed Max. So none of that is coming up. And that's just causing them to fight. And obviously a lot is happening because we had that moment where she traps him in the revolving door with the knife and the explosion. He manages to get out of it. What's very interesting is we find out later that the super high risk job that the other John and Jane Smith have is taking out other Smiths. That's the high risk job they've got, is taking out people who are very good at what they do already, and they have to eliminate them. So they find out that, the person we murdered out on that helicopter mission, yep, another Smith. You took him out.
Yeah, they went and they were supposed to, they were going to go take out those Smiths, but this set of Smiths was like, hey, why don't y'all go do it? So they send them on the mission. But in that episode where they have kind of the couples night, right? The new John and Jane, they get a full tour of the house. They're like, oh, here's where our guns are. Here's our panic room. What did you think? And Pooya, even in the moment, I was like, is this okay? Do you just show people? It felt like they were too loose as spies, which probably leads me to believe that maybe that's why that John and Jane were there. They knew that they weren't going to last too much longer.
Yeah, so that's the thing, is that I didn't really clock that until later in the episode when the John says, you think we met by accident? Hi knew, all right, 1152 Farmers Market, that's where you're going to be. Hi knows all. And they spoke about Hi, like Hi is a higher belief, like a god amongst them. And that was a very fascinating peel behind the curtains of, okay, Hi is on a different level of knowing. So much so that I pretty much just mapped everything and can predict everything before it happens.
Yeah, them giving them the tour of the house, showing them the panic room, showing them where the guns were, telling them everything. 4 episodes in, it just feels like, Hi said, listen, this couple is not going to make it. At some point, we're going to need to eliminate them. So go ahead, get the lay of the land, meet them, get to know them, get them to let their guard down. And then that way, when they hit that third strike, you go in for the kill. So in this episode, that's exactly what we see. John and Jane are fighting. There's moments where John is trying to, suss out maybe she had a relationship with Paul Dano next door. There's just things in this relationship that they're trying to deal with while their lives are in danger and they can't even see it. So they fight. The truth serum comes out. They start to talk about their true feelings. But at that point, the new John and Jane show up and they're like, hey, y'all on truth serum? That's perfect. How many guns do you have in the house? How much ammo do you have? Where is it all hidden? Da, 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 da. And they have no choice but to release all that information.
Mm-hmm.
So while they're tied up or while they're, I guess, incapacitated, the John and Janes are talking and new John, he sneezes. We know from episode 4 that he has the sneeze in threes. And so 1 sneeze, 2 sneeze, Jane makes her move. She shoots him in the eye or something.
Well, so what's interesting is we've learned that he sneezes in threes, but we did learn when John and Jane talked about it after the fact, they said, yeah, I think he faked the third sneeze. I don't think the third sneeze was real. That was for show because they acted upon the second sneeze. And I think she shot him in the face because he couldn't see anymore, the other John, by the sounds of it. But the other Jane was able to escape the gunfire.
Right. And so shoots him in the eye. They escape. John has been hit. I mean, these people have been fighting for hours before the new John and Jane show up. So they're already down bad. So Donald Glover and Maya Erskine, they dip out into the panic room. Parker Posey's Jane. She's walking around. She's trying to get them to come out because she knows exactly where they're hiding. She's got a grand tour. They have 1 bullet. Jane has 1 bullet left in the gun. And she's telling John, look, we're running out of time. I know you say I always take the lead, but give me the plan. What do you think we should do? John says, all right, it's going to get dark soon. Eventually, she's going to have to move away from the door to turn on the light. At that point, we can strike. You can strike because he's not looking great. He's looking like he might bleed out in this moment. So it's all going to come down to Jane. And this completely mirrors the episode 1, Pooya, where we see Alexander Skarsgård taken out almost instantly. And the other Jane having to be the one to step up before she is taken out. And here we are again. It looks like Donald Glover might not make it, but we have Jane and her 1 bullet and it getting closer to nighttime. So when the lights go out, Jane makes her move, but we never see what exactly happens. We see 2 flashes of light in the window of the house. 3? Was it 3 flashes of light? Yeah. And we know Jane only had 1 bullet. So look, we don't know what happens to John and Jane Smith, our John and Jane, Donald Glover and Maya Erskine. But I know with 1 bullet and 3 shots, it probably didn't end well, but we never find out. Pooya, that's pretty much how the episode ends. I mean, we don't get any follow-up. We don't know how it ends. All we know is that our John and Jane and potentially the other John and Jane, they might be dead.
So, yeah, it's a very interesting way, and I love how Donald Glover leaves it open-ended like this because there's certainly arguments to be made on whether or not there's a second season, but it's left in a way where if this is the season finale, the series finale, it's perfect. They've landed it in a perfect spot because you do have the bookend start and beginning the exact same of the John and Jane's getting murdered. And here you have the same ending as well as the beginning. However, we love a good conspiracy theory on this pod. We like chopping up some theories. So let me hit you with one.
Okay.
They just spent the entire episode talking about how Hi knows everything. Hi is onto them. Hi knows before they know. And what if at that point the truth serum had diminished and she's out loud saying I have 1 bullet?
Oh.
To trick them.
Yeah. What if she has more than 1 bullet?
Exactly. The other thing is potentially 2 bullets from Jane 2, because it was 2 bullets in 2 flashes in succession and then 1 after.
Gotcha.
And, what if Jane opens the door, comes in, bang, bang, misses both, and then our Jane snipes with the 1 bullet, takes her out? Because I could see that happening. Because either they both survive or neither survives. I think the show cannot go on with one of them dead. I feel like I don't want that. If it's going to happen again, I need both of them there, please.
Yeah. I think that I don't think you get a season 2 of this, not with the same John and Jane, right? Unless season 2 we come back and they have somehow miraculously survived this, and now
They're going
they're
after
the
Hi.
right. They're going after Hi together. But I would need to see exactly how Jane pulled this off, because I leaving it up to the imagination. You bring up a good point. The truth serum had worn off because by that time Jane was lying to John again. He's like, "Does it look bad?" She's like, "No, it's not bad at all." He's like, "Yes, it is. It is bad. I'm dying." And so maybe she does save him. Maybe they make it out. Maybe they go on to take on Hi. We just don't know. All we know is that Paul Dano next door is very happy because this amazing property is about to be left vacant, and he's probably going to be able to sell it and make a lot of money, or get it to somebody to get sold. So that's pretty much how the episode ends. Pooya, that was crazy.
That was incredible. Like, I really love this show, and part of me thought, they could go, like, the show could be done now, but it's the perfect ending. Like, they nailed it. It's great. Like, they gave me a lot of emotions. I really didn't want either of them to die, but if they both did, that's fine. Season's over. Other option is they do a season 2 and it's them going after Hi. The third option, which I don't think is likely, but I could see happening, and I'm not mad at it because it feels like a whole new show, is you treat this like the White Lotus a little bit, where you're just, it's like an anthology series. Like, this is over, new series starts, new John and Jane begin. And it's just like similar situation. I could see that being a third option, but I really don't think that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, I think all of them are possible options. I just don't know which one. I know that a lot of people, I was reading online, a lot of people really had issue because they were like, this is not the Mr. and Mrs. Smith I was expecting. Like, like the title really leads you to believe something else. And then by the end, I think this is decent. I think this is really good, actually. I think maybe for branding purposes, you call this something completely different and you get a whole different amount of feedback from it. Like people are not going in expecting Brangelina shooting at each other while being in love, but also being competing spies. I think people heard Mr. and Mrs. Smith, saw this and said, well, that's not my Mr. and Mrs. Smith, so I'm not going to give it a chance. But I strongly recommend against that. If you listen to all of this and you haven't watched the show, go watch it. It's a fun watch. The chemistry gets better and better as they go on. Donald Glover's shirtless throughout the entire thing because I guess if you get jacked for a role, you want people to see it. And then it's so much fun. The fighting is good. It's kind of funny in different parts. And it watches the whole journey of, I guess, this couple from the day they meet to the day death, I guess, does them part. We will see, right? Maybe not. Who knows? But we'll have to wait and find out more from Donald Glover later on. Pooya, this was such a fun ride. Thank you to all the people who gave comments and feedback.
Yes.
We found out that there is an app that you can use to monitor the plants that you water, but maybe it doesn't work exactly like that. But we do know that that's a thing now. So we learned so much. This was so much fun. Pooya, you got to come back so we can do something like this again.
I'm very down, man. And those of you listening to this, if you made it this far, let us know. Is there another show similar in vein to this that you think we'd be a good match to cover? Because we do have the time and appreciation for each other to, look under the hood of another show.
Yeah, we're still waiting to get information about Bel Air. So if anybody hears anything,
with bated breath,
let us know because Bel Air post-show recap, we'd love for it to come back. But yeah, let us know if y'all have any feedback about this episode. If you have any feedback about the recap, is there anything we missed from the show that we really needed to talk about that maybe we didn't understand? Let us know. You can always email at recapkickback@gmail.com and give us your direct feedback. Of course, the comment section, click like on the YouTube videos, leave a 5-star review at recapkickback.com. All those ways you can support the podcast and help other people find out what we're doing here on Recap Kickback. Pooya, tell everybody in the meantime, until you come back to the Kickback, where they can find you and what you got going on.
Well, they can find me on Twitter at Pooyaism. They can find me on Twitch, twitch.tv/Pooya. That's where I am when I'm not podcasting, and have a good time there. As far as podcasts go, though, Traders is coming to an end soon. This week is the final week, with both the finale and the reunion being on this Thursday. So that's going to be a lot of fun. I'll be live with Rob after to talk about that. And I just had an exit interview with Peter, the latest person. It's actually not the latest person. The person banished at the start of the episode. So I got that for y'all. Should be available by now. And 90 Day Fiance, it is tell-all season for that as well. I have made the conscious decision, after hearing from some people, some of the listeners, to double up and save up for next week. So instead of doing a part 1 and part 2 recap, we're doing a one recap next week. It'll be myself and Sasha Joseph will be joining me to break that down. And Liana and I will be talking Masked Singer because that's coming back this week. So we'll see how that goes.
Okay. Thank you so much, Pooya. In the meantime, y'all know what it is here at the Kickback. Mari and I are back in March to talk about different stuff. And now this time, we're going to do a movie review ourselves. Mari and I are going to talk about Tyler Perry's Mea Culpa on Netflix with our guest Keeks from the Public Enemy podcast. Check that out this week as it drops. I think Tyrone and I have been talking about BMF on Stars. I've never seen it, but it's on season 3. And I think I want to dive into it and get caught up. So me and Tyrone might do a season watch of that or a series watch of that to get caught up. So things coming for the future episodes for Recap Kickback. Of course, stay tuned. Follow at Recap Kickback on Twitter and on all social media platforms to kind of see what's coming up next. Then on RHAP, I got a lot of reality TV stuff going on too, right? So I'm doing exit interviews for Deal or No Deal Island and covering every episode of Deal or No Deal with Rob and Jenny on the Hit or Quit podcast feed. Rob and I are still doing Nothing But Netflix, our podcast where we talk about the top Netflix shows and movies. This week we talked about Spaceman with our special guest Akiva Winokur. Rob and I are still talking about Pearson on Peacock. We're about to wrap up that season. And so on our podcast, Suits Yourself, our daily Suits rewatch podcast, we've gone through every episode of Suits. You can find it by subscribing to Suits Yourself wherever you get your podcast. But then we start talking about the spinoff series. We're talking about Pearson. So check it out. It's on Peacock. Watch the show. And then, of course, keep up with the podcast by following Suits Yourself or go to suitspodcast.com to subscribe to that. And this week, I will also be guesting on the Free Agents pod with Matt Lagori and Brian Scally to talk about the traders. So a lot going on for me too. Follow me on Twitter at Recap Kickback to keep up with all of that and more. For Pooya and myself, y'all ain't got to go home, but thank y'all again for coming to the Kickback. We'll see y'all later. Peace.